All right, welcome everybody. Good to have you this morning. Um, I think I'll start with, for those of you who have figured out how to get up early on a Sunday morning with daylight savings, which I love daylight savings time. It's awesome. Um, so if you're here on time and early, glad to have you. The hat is thanks to my dermatologist. So I've got enough work being done on the old scalp that I thought I'd, cover it up for you. Oh boy. Well, today I want to spend some time reflecting on sort of where we are in this moment when we're all in a sense honoring the year we've spent together under the weight of the pandemic and sort of the energy that's moving around at this point in time and how we can think about that energy and sort of our place inside of this moment uh, from a kind of a spiritual perspective. How can we layer onto this moment some of the wisdom from our own spiritual tradition, kind of in order to get oriented as we navigate the next wave of how we will cooperate together and collaborate together and give expression to our lives. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time with that today because it's just such a momentous day. Um, so that's where we're going to go today, and I think to tether it a little bit to some of the spiritual mentors from our past is always a good thing to be doing. Um, if you're joining us for the live experience, obviously a shout out to each other. Make sure you connect to each other. This is the way we have our experience of communion is now virtual, continuously virtual these days. So make sure you shout out to each other and share your reflections as we move through this time together. So any insights you have, make sure you post. Make sure that you actively engage this space with emoticons or liking the feed or whatever, so that it becomes sort of a vibrant experience for you this morning and throughout the week as it lives on our Facebook feed. So let's get going this morning. It's been about a year. It was in March. I think it was on March 11th, possibly, that we began to hear that there was, this pandemic that was emerging. And I don't know about you, but I remember some of the early indicators that something was amiss, right? There was the NBA was going on at the time, and I think there was an NBA game that was, literally the seats were emptied because a player or two on one of the teams had shown signs of having this virus, and we knew that things were going to be different. The WHO announced that there was a global pandemic moving across our planet. The doctor in Wuhan, I remember one of the early deaths, began to shake our nerves a bit, and we thought, what's gonna become of this? And like most plagues, I figured this thing would pass pretty quickly, but here we are a year out. Um, a year out when we can remember being shocked by the early deaths that took place in association with this thing. 30 people passed away because of this virus, and we knew it was going to be serious. And now we sit at, in this country alone, over 530,000 lives lost. I mean, the numbers are just horrific. And part of me, if you give me a moment here, maybe you can think about this too. Part of me is just puzzled by a pandemic, right? Puzzled by a virus that moves in our landscape, in the air we breathe, and then settles into a host and then consumes that host, right? Is so prevalent within the host that it begins to take over and chokes out the host, right? The host cannot sustain this virus, cannot sustain that relationship over time, And so medical communities are called to make sure that that individual who now serves as a host can somehow survive this invasive virus that has moved into its lungs and into its biology. It's shocking that a virus would enter into a host on which it's dependent and then destroy that host, right? It's just it's a weird idea. And yet the more I think about it, the more I think, even with all of our intellect and our cultural awareness and our language and our ability to reason and observe, in many ways humans have done the same thing at some level to the planet that serves as our host, right? We've settled into this host and we're living in relationship to the host in a way that's choking out the host. The host is not, it's a non-sustainable relationship. So there's a bit of virus in all of us, right? We're sort of waking up to that as we spent this year together in such an intimate relationship with something that has this capacity to consume the life that is holding it. And it just sets us up for this awkward kind of realization that we should be more mindful, in the way in which we manage this current situation that's continuing to be an issue for us, and the way in which we too live inside of a host that holds all of us, right? How do we normalize a relationship that is going to be sustainable, that's healthy, that's balanced, that's harmonized, rather than our consumptive patterns that just simply use up all the resources and just in such a relentless manner that it's non-sustainable. So all these things are floating around in my head as I kind of mark this anniversary of the virus, and living with you through this pandemic, right? I also remember when we had to shut down church as we know it and move to this format, and how I thought, well, that was going to last a couple of weeks, and here we are continuing to sustain this relationship. Sort of all these things we've had to do to kind of live into this. It's a bit overwhelming, frankly. And so today, to start, I wanted to kind of allow you a time to just, in a sense, hold and honor all that this year has been. And we've talked about that before. How we tend to the experience that we've had together and that we continue to have as we think about how to begin to move forward. And when this first started and we were wrestling with a lot of the deaths, we put together an experience for people called A Moment to Grieve. And it was just a time to pause and acknowledge all of the suffering and impact of the pandemic that we were experiencing. And we did it at the Labyrinth at the church where I work, and invited a local singer-songwriter to do a piece for that. She wrote a piece for that. We lit candles on the Labyrinth to honor those who had passed away. And so today, I thought it'd be good to kind of pause and revisit that. And so for our sort of centering piece today, before I provide some kind of reflections and hear, or see your thoughts today, let's just spend a moment in that, the music written for that. And I would just have you pause and let the lyrics of this song kind of guide you into a centering time today, just to be reflective and to let the words of that song and the visual reminder of all that has been impacted by this pandemic, just to guide you into a sense of being present for the reality of this as we have our discussion today. And then, of course, if you want to use that piece, it's posted on our YouTube channel so that you can go back and kind of revisit it as well if you want to spend time with it in its sort of longer format. But today I'm going to invite Laura Zucker to kind of guide us in song as for a moment we reflect on where we have been together in this year.
Eyes upon a life in jagged pieces, on a world that we don't recognize. Earth below or sky above can hold us. Watch the wave of falling, fleeting lives. Every corner far and wide, when all of life draws oxygen, we see, we grieve, alone inside, yet we breathe as one. Breathe as one. Feel the ache of holding too hard to hold. Feel the wall of your defenses tumble down. Look into the well of being so dark and deep that you're afraid that you might drown. In every corner, far and wide, when all of life draws oxygen, we see, we grieve, alone inside, and we breathe as one. Breathe as one. Life into community, life into humanity. I am you, you are me. Let us breathe as one. Life into humanity, life into community. I am you, you are me. Let us breathe as one. Breathe as one. Breathe as
Isn't that a beautiful piece? This call to breathe as one, this call to acknowledge that what we've recognized in this year-long pandemic that we've faced, that we are breathing collectively. And how do we breathe into humanity? How do we breathe into community? How do we breathe as one? I think that's really the calling for us. And I think Laura captured the kind of challenge or opportunity that we face in such a beautiful way in the song that she provided. And hopefully you found that moment as I did, this invitation to kind of feel the depth and the weight and the, what would you call it? Kind of the accountability to be present for this experience with your whole self, right? With soul and body and breath and will. Clearly a challenge for us in these times. I think it's even more of a challenge because we've we hear over and over again now that people are ready to get back to normal, right? We're you think about Texas rushing to just say, all right, everybody, back to normal. Everybody wants to go to Florida and, get on the beach and just get back to the way things were, back to normal. And yet we know, and we've heard this all along, right? That normal wasn't really working at all, right? The whole thing we discovered is that normal, as we think of normal, was really, it was all right, but it wasn't where we need to be. It, there were too many lives suffering in the midst of normal as we knew it. So I'm going to propose today that you don't use that term. If you're part of this community, you avoid using that term that, oh, I just can't wait to get back to normal, and maybe reclaim a new idea, and that is, I want to give everything I have to create a new normal. I'm looking forward to crafting a new normal as we move into the days that are ahead of us. Or maybe use the phrase, right? I'm ready to get on with it, right? To move forward, to acknowledge what we have learned and what we've experienced and what we've grown in our awareness of in this time together, and to get on with crafting uh, a new sense of community, a new sense of how we live together as one, a new sense of our relationship with the planet. All of that um, should be the energy that we're building up inside, and not uh, this kind of longing to get back to the way things were, assuming that it was normal, but this moment um, to acknowledge that in that old normal there was a lot that was broken. One of the ways that this kind of moment manifests itself in religious traditions is this old practice of what they called confession and forgiveness. And I was never a huge fan of this, but many religious services would start off with, before you moved into the content for the day, you would kind of confess. You'd say, here's all the things that I've experienced as broken, or even have participated in breaking. And you sought from God some level of forgiveness. And then the clergy person or the religious leader would then announce some level of forgiveness to you. You see it in Catholic traditions too, right? Where you go into the confessional booth and behind the screen is the priest, and you're confessing all of your sins, the way in which you've separated yourself from this gift of life or from God, to the priest. And then the priest um, tells you kind of what you can do to kind of be absolved of what you've seen as wrong in your life or broken in your life. And yet these days, I'm not sure that model is is as healthy, right? I'm not really sure that we need to seek forgiveness from God. We need to recognize that there's somebody else on the other side of that screen. That we've awakened to the damages that we have done in the ways in which we've constructed our social fabric, that have caused people such sustained grief and agony and pain. Behind that screen is, like, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, right? When we've recognized that the normal that we adhered to caused so much pain and suffering for so long for somebody else on the other side of that screen, it's those eyes that we want to stare in and say, we recognize now and are acknowledging the dis-ease that we have caused by creating that level of normal or normalcy that has caused such grief in the BIPOC community, right? Black lives, indigenous lives, people of color. What we're waking up to that. We're not going to return back to those days. Rather, we should be acknowledging what has been broken in our collective life, and then working towards reconciliation reconnection, recommitting ourselves to one another, being present for each other in new ways. That's where we want to go, right? That's the new normal that we have to seek together as a people. And we got to practice that new normal in our little sub communities like churches and small groups and gatherings and conversations and one to ones and collectively. We got to birth that new normal if we can into existence. Who's on the other side of that screen? I think of a planet full of diverse species is on the other side of that screen. And I realize that the lifestyle that I have adhered to, that has become my normal, has done damage to the biodiversity that is a part of the host that holds me. I get that. And I'm getting that more and more. I'm not going to move into, um, I'm not going to go back to the good old days. I'm not going to go back to the normal. I too have to acknowledge the brokenness, see it, say it, claim it, own it, right? And then move into a life that begins to um, recommit, reconcile, um, reconnect to that which has served as um, place for me, ecological place that holds me and holds all of us, to relational space, our collective lives that are so interwoven. We're waking up to that. That's where we have to be putting our energy, I think. I think who's on the other side of that screen as I kind of acknowledge all this brokenness. It's future generations. It's the so many lives that have been lost in this pandemic, and the way in which I have responsibility to behave in ways that try to mitigate the spread of a virus that has evolutionary advantage as it replicates over and over again every time it finds a host. I have to understand that and live my life accordingly, right? For the sake of all those whose lives have been lost to this pandemic. I think that's the challenge for us, is to, in a sense, acknowledge when we see that something is amiss, to confess, to be open about it, and then to seek some level of effort towards reconciliation. You can see it in a lot of our religious wisdom bearers throughout the history, that we've shared collectively. I think about it when Moses was in Egypt and he knew the system was broken, and yet he took it upon himself to strike out in violence against a slaveholder and murdered someone, and he had blood on his hands, and um, and he knew that he wasn't participating in any way of healing in this broken system, and so he flees. Right. My guess is Moses had some sort of a wake up moment where he saw clearly, or more clearly, what was broken in this Egyptian model. He moves into desert, and out there he feels the call of the divine to return back in and seek liberty, right? Seek liberty of people, and to craft a new life out from that. That religious model should be our model in this moment in time, right? That we are connected enough and aware enough of the brokenness in the system, and the brokenness that we have caused in the system, and maybe have collaborated with in the system, to be able to draw away long enough, reflect long enough, and then move in ways that begin to bring about some sense of liberation, of healing, of moving beyond into a new tomorrow. I mean, that clearly is at the heart of religious experiences. If you're a Christian person and you connect your wisdom to the way of Jesus, clearly you see him in moments kind of waking up to uh, reality about the way in which normal sometimes is the problem, and not the baseline. I think about his conversation with the woman who he's trying to say, "Hey, look, you shouldn't be bothering me because you're a Gentile woman, and I'm here to work with all these Jewish folk, right?" And and the woman says to him something along the lines of, "Well, even the dogs feed on the crumbs that fall from the table." And her response, it's a great story. Her response all of a sudden wakes Jesus up to seeing her in a new way, right? And all of a sudden he's able to stand in solidarity with her as she claims her place in this broken system, and he recognizes that. And you can see in the text around that story this sort of transformation he goes through, and this idea that he brings of opening up um, communion or community wider and wider to the population, no matter your religious orientation. You see it in Saul, who's oppressing the early community of Jesus followers, and somehow he wakes up in that moment and then realizes that he's going to journey the rest of his days in solidarity with that community, and literally changes his name, right? Renames himself to Paul as he journeys in a different way. I mean, you just see that pattern over and over and over again. So, my invitation for today as religious people is just to simply, as this invitation to reopen, which is a great phrase, this invitation to reimagine normal. Um, Let it be grounded in not only your deepest spiritual rootedness in your faith tradition or in your spiritual practices, but also in your awareness of, of what we have discovered in this collective year together. As we have walked this kind of labyrinth journey, witnessed um, death and loss on so many different levels, awakened to those realities, owned those realities, and then let us now try to move into a way of breathing anew, right? Allowing the breath we share to be breath that is really life-giving in a new way moving forward. Let's breathe into community. Let's breathe into humanity. Let's let's breathe again as one. Let that image kind of guide you in the weeks ahead as we all um, build capacity and passion for reconnecting with each other and the planet that is our host, that holds us all. All right. Amen to that today. Of course, just a few of my reflections as I partner with you in trying to figure out how we move forward in all this. Hopefully, it's a moment that, you know, we can share some collective insight into that. And I obviously welcome any of your insights as well, as you can share them with one another. Today, I'm going to bring in Sam Ledoux as we kind of wrap up this section. Sam is going to take us into some of our announcement time together. And then after the session is over, we invite those of you who are interested to join us for our virtual coffee hour. You can do that. I put a link in the feed today to put you into the media page on the OSLC website. And under Sunday mornings, you can see the Sunday virtual cafe. And if you click on that, it'll take you right to the Sunday cafe after this is all over. So if you're interested in that, that's your way in. So you can be able to just spend 20 minutes with us, kind of reflecting on the theme for today. Maybe what you have noticed most heavily has been kind of the broken places that you want to acknowledge, maybe ways in which you're hoping to move forward, and to have a cup of coffee together. So let me bring on Sam, and we'll get into our announcement time today and hear from her as we continue our time together. Good morning, Sam. That's it.
morning.
Oh, very good. We're getting better at this. I can tell. You never know when I'm going to actually let you in, right?
Yep. No, I'm going to be a little bit more prepared or have a secondary device here so you guys don't get ringtones that goes back and forth. But
Very good. Very
we're
good.
getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there, but it's great to have you this morning. So, like I said to everybody, Sam's bringing us sort of some announcements, what's going on in the faith community that we're a part of, so that you can kind of tether into that and connect to that. For those of you who aren't a part of that community, at least you can kind of see how our communities of faith trying to figure out a way to navigate these times. So, Sam, what's going on in church life at OSLC?
All right. So church life at OSLC has lots of stuff going on this week. Amen to not going back, but moving forward. Lots of good stuff despite all of these changes. So we had executive committee this past Wednesday. And just a quick reminder, once a month, we'll hear from either somebody on executive committee or from the parish council. And we thanked everybody last week for responding to Mark, but what I'm not sure about is, do we need more responses, Dan? And if we do, who should people contact?
Yeah, so what's happening is I'm bringing the nominating committee together. They don't know this yet, but this week, and they sit down and try to come up with a list of people who might function as leaders for us in the next year. But it's better if someone's thinking, I'd love to serve in that role, if they just reach out to me in an email, and then I'll bring their name to nominating committee, and then we'll put a team together for, the leadership for next year. So that's probably the best thing. Just email me at this point, dan@oslc.net, and then we'll start sending out emails and inviting you to serve for the next fiscal year.
There we go. You heard it from the source. Email Dan if you are interested. Coming up this week in some of our regularly scheduled stuff, Monday night at 7 p.m., we've got Women of the Old Testament with Martin. Thursday morning at 11 a.m., we'll have Life Before God with our adult forum. And then Thursday evening at 7 p.m., we've got our parish council meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, we've got Digital Days of Service. And if you are sitting there thinking, what is that and what does that mean? Just check the comments section. I dropped a link in there. Click the link. It'll tell you about it. We've also got a new series on Soul Forum. I saw that go up earlier this week. Hopefully you've already listened to it, but if you haven't, you can get that on any one of your favorite podcast apps, or you can just click through on Facebook to listen to it. This one's looking at integrating economic justice into the peacemaking process. So we're going beyond capitalism, socialism, and welfare economy, working toward a profound economic justice. Gosh, I almost feel like my advisor, Cynthia Molobeta, wrote that.
That's great.
So you can find it on your favorite podcast app. Definitely take some time to listen to that. That's a good one. The OSLC youth are inviting everybody to submit an entry for the OSLC Easter baking competition. Just reading about this made me hungry. I'm a little sad. The competition is photos only, but if you need somebody to taste things, I volunteer as tribute.
Boy, I tell you, the level of self-sacrifice with this project is just admirable.
I am just really dedicated.
You really are. I mean, I'm willing to taste all of these entries if required.
I mean, this is what is asked of us as clergy, right? So the categories include most colorful, most creative, and most Eastery. They were interpreted by youth judges. So, play to your audience. Photo submission deadline, and it is just photo submission. The deadline is Sunday, April 4th by 5 p.m. One submission per person, no cheating. And please submit your entries via email to youth@oslc.net. Winners will be announced the Sunday after Easter.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I didn't realize it's such a tight window. I'm going to have to start thinking about this. So it's coming up.
No, I was like, man, I don't have all my baking gear.
Yeah.
All right. So Youth and Peer Ministry is excited to host some community building events. I think your last one was a paint and sip, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got some new opportunities coming up, but they want to do a survey to get a little bit more clarity on what people might like to do. That is something that I also dropped the link to in the comments, so you guys can just click on the link and go take the survey. They'll find out more about what types of events people might want to do and what the best timing might be, and then you all can gather together on Zoom and have a good time.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. We've also got a special shout out to Tom and Rich. Apparently we tackled a major water emergency on site. So my applause to you. Those are not fun.
They're not.
They isolated a leak in one of the water lines that was wasting water every month and dealing with a main fire suppression system issue. So
yeah,
good work there.
we were losing 2 gallons of water an hour.
Oh,
I mean,
ouch.
that's serious. And so we were really panicking. So we haven't solved it, but at least we've stopped it. So that was a big one. My goodness.
And Rich, your saints.
Yeah.
All right. And that's all the big stuff. You can always come back and listen to announcements again via the YouTube channel. That link is also in the comments. And as always, we are here. We are in a digital world at this point, and it's just as real as face-to-face. So please share this interaction with your friends and your family and people you love that you think might be interested. I will tell you personally, I love Dan's reflections, and I share them with all of my church people because
Oh, that's awfully
so
kind.
valuable.
Yeah.
And I no doubt everybody at Our Saviors sees the same and appreciates the same. So please share it around because it helps support OSLC and it helps support our work. And that's the news. Dan, back to you.
All right. Okay, thanks, Sam. Just one more quick thing. If you're interested in watching the full video on A Time to Grieve, which we did early in the pandemic, I can't remember where we were in the loss at that point, but it was significant. It's a little bit of an extended piece. It's a nice piece to do at some point. And we can drop, I know Sam's great about dropping links in, so maybe she could drop that link in at some point too. But it's on our website. You can find it in our YouTube channel. So that's a place to find it. And then I did post in the link a way to get to our media page. So if you're wanting to join us for the virtual coffee hour that's happening next, you can use that link there to pop in. So once Sam and I are done, you can join us for that. So with that, I want to thank anybody who's been a part of this conversation up to this point. I mean, one of the things we're trying to do on a Sunday morning is not, do your classic worship style, but just to dive into the kind of the wisdom traditions that inform the way in which we both imagine where we're situated and kind of create the hope that can kind of guide us forward. And that synergy is really at the heart of the religious experience. So we think we can do it in just these conversations. We hope, you find them meaningful as we move through this together. So thanks for being a part of today. And we will see you next Sunday as we gather together at 9 a.m. again for a few more Sunday reflections. And for those of you who'd like to join us after we close this off, meet us for coffee. All right. Take care, everybody.